to another edition of 42nd Street Pete's Grindhouse, and I'm sure a lot of you out there recognize the music playing in the background here. Of course, it's the Little Rascals, and how many of us grew up watching the antics of the Little Rascals, back in the day? I mean, Monster Kids. We also had this too. We had Laurel and Hardy, we had the Three Stooges, we had all that good stuff. And, it was all cool. And, it started out as, these things were, shot in the silent era, a lot of them. Then they got into, the 30s with the soundies. And those are the ones that I sort of remember and sort of really like because they held up for me. And, you had Joe Cobb, you had Farina, you had Weezer, you had Dorothy, I'm trying to think who else, Stymie, a bunch of people. And, that's what we grew up watching. And we, sort of emulated that stuff when we went out to play because, these guys built, stuff out of nothing, go-karts and those fire trucks and shit like that. So, we would scavenge around on garbage day and, try to build shit, which pretty much ended tragically, but what the fuck. But, when these things first were shown, they ran anywhere from 18 to 21 minutes. And, when you really look at the whole situation with the Rascals and things, some people would say, and of course Bill Cosby was a big one, that, these are racist and they shouldn't be shown, they shouldn't be seen. Well, yeah, you can say that, but it was sort of more of a reflection of the times that they were shot in. I don't think, anyone back then set out to be, racist. And of course, what people don't know is that, Farina was probably one of the highest paid, guys back there. He was getting like $350 a week in the 30s. Shit, I didn't make $350 a week until the 80s. So he was well paid, and they would get him to slip into the step and fetch it mode a couple times. And then you had Stymie, and actually that derby that Stymie was wearing was given to him by Stan Laurel because, it was Hal Roach. Everything was done on the same lot. And sometimes people that were in like the Laurel and Hardy films would pop up in the Little Rascals things, like the one I just watched the other night, Shiver Me Timbers, with Billy Gilbert, who has a very boisterous voice, for lack of better words, was the ship captain telling tall tales to the kids, and they were playing hooky. And of course, Miss Crabtree got involved, and then the captain devises a plan to have the kids come back at night so he can scare the shit out of them and scare them, off from not being pirates. Well, that sort of backfired because the kids got the upper hand and beat up his crew, which they were all acting and things like that. So, also Billy Gilbert was in another one, I think it was Free Eats, where him and this other guy were posing as a married couple with these two babies who were actually midgets, who were thieves. So they got the crew to take these babies, quote, to the party where they'd get these rich women to pick them up, and while the rich women were holding them, they'd clip the chains, earrings, whatever. So that was a whole deal too. And then, of course, there was Edgar Kennedy, who was master of the slow burn, who showed up as Kennedy the cop in some Laurel and Hardy things and some Rascals things. And like I said, I sort of dug the 30s. It was more, I don't know, they were more sort of out of hand there. There was a thing with the choo-choo train where they switched clothes with a bunch of orphans because they thought they were going to get a great deal on a train ride. And of course, the train ride went completely nuts with letting animals loose on it and fireworks and blowing shit up. Hook and Ladder, where they had a fire company where Stymie is basically throwing cases of dynamite out of a building and watching them explode and shit. So yeah, there was some crazy shit going on. And like I said, we all grew up on this stuff. When they introduced Spanky, he was this little kid, with Petey. Petey was a pit bull. I don't know how many Peteys they had there. Sometimes Petey had the circle on this eye, sometimes he had it on that eye. And that was all drawn in. Dogs don't go like that. But they were all pit bulls. And that the Spanky episode had Billy Gilbert as his father, who was a miser hoarding all this money, and his brother and his friends were putting on a play Uncle Tom's Cabin, where here it gets pretty fucked up because, they're bringing little Eva to heaven. Stymie's getting actually whipped by Simon Legree and shit like that. So some people would go, oh, fuck. But as kids, it didn't register to us that there was anything fucking wrong with this whole thing. And, maybe it was wrong, like that. But like I said, they were just depicting things as they were in that time period. And then, like I said, you had Bill Cosby go completely berserk and wanted to buy up all the prints and destroy them. Same with Amos and Andy. Were they racist? Probably, if you looked at them today. But, all these kids played their parts and played them great. I mean, there was one, I remember one Fly My Kite, where this evil stepson was trying to take off Grandma, and Grandma had these bonds, and she thought they were useless, but they were worth like $100,000. And they were tied to the end of a kite that Chubby was flying, and this guy tried to get, the bonds, and they really fucked this guy up. I'm telling you, forget about the racism, what about the violence? I mean, not that this guy didn't deserve it. They sort of put a rope around his foot and dragged him across the lot over a board full of nails, over broken glass, over all this shit. Then they had him, he climbed the pole to try to get the kite down, and they were zapping him with electricity and shit. Then they fell off into the creek. I mean, it was crazy shit, but, as kids, there was nothing wrong with this shit. I sat here and watched a bunch of this shit the other night because I got the Blu-ray set, and to me, it still holds up. I was amused by the whole thing. I sort of lost interest when the original crew started phasing out. Like, I know that, Joe Cobb got big and he wasn't fat anymore, so they replaced him with Chubby Chaney. And you look at Chubby Chaney in some of these scenes, and it's sad that the guy, the kid died at like 18, and, but when you look at his expressions and shit like that, man, this kid could have been a great actor. I sort of didn't like the whole deal, when it got into, just Spanky as the main character and Alfalfa and Buckwheat. Some of them were good, but then, it started getting like overkill because Alfalfa really annoyed the piss out of me. And then MGM got him, and you got into the 40s with this thing, and then the whole crew changed, and I think that's when Robert Blake came in, and Froggy, and those guys. But like I said, my favorites were the 30s ones, because, these guys were, the kids were ragamuffins, they were street kids, and we sort of, identified with that. Not that we were, ragamuffins and street kids, but, we looked at these kids, and they were comfortable in their own skin, and we emulated them growing up. So, sadly, most of the, these guys didn't do well after, they outgrew their childhood, stardom. Some of them went on to do other movies and stuff like that, but I think Alfalfa was killed over a $50 bet. So just a lot of tragedies. I remember, though, and this is when you're going back into the 70s, that they had some kind of reunion at the Capitol Theater in Passaic where they had Cowboy Bob, I remember, and Howdy Doody and Clarabelle, and they actually had the original Spanky and the original Darla, who were still alive then, come out on stage. So I remember that. I even think Spanky had a restaurant somewhere down on the Jersey Shore. I might be wrong. But, this is, a real big part of my childhood, and probably a lot of, guys listening to this was a big part of their childhood, too. So there's nothing wrong with the Little Rascals. I mean, like I said, it was a product of the times. I never walked away feeling that black people were lower than I was, or worse off than I was. I never had that thing, and I grew up in West Orange, which was part of the Oranges, which is kind of weird scenario. Orange, New Jersey was the center, and at that point in time, it was a lot of Italians and a lot of blacks living there. West Orange was predominantly mixed, whites and Jewish people there. South Orange was a little bit ritzy, Seton Hall was there, and East Orange was the semi-bad section that was buttoned up against Newark. So my interaction with black kids came going to the kiddie matinees, and that's where I met black kids. So there was never any prejudice on my part or anything like that. We all blended because we all wanted to see monster movies. So, again, like I said, The Little Rascals is great. Some of the stuff still holds up to me, and it's just a little slice in time. And to me, it's still highly entertaining and a really big part of my childhood. So that's our show for today. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe, and we'll catch you on the flip side.